was quite the countdown. Chris Riley behind the scenes there. So it's like a soothing tone to it. Happy Friday. I'm Clint with T360 Organized Real Estate, another edition of our webinar conversations. Happy today to be joined by some folks who are in the prop tech sector and going to have them share a little bit today on their thoughts about, their entree into the organized real estate space, what they've learned, observations that they've had in their time in the space. And so happy to have you along with us. As always, if you do have questions, feel free to pop those into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll monitor that and address those as we go along here. So, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Got to have you just introduce yourselves and your company a little bit here to start us out, and then I also want you to answer this question: what did you, or maybe it's a better question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Was it a prop tech guy? Branick, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Hi, everyone. My name is Branick Weix, co-founder, CEO of Aryeo, and we're building a real estate content platform. We think pictures, videos, 3D tours, floor plans are really important to real estate, and we work with all parties that help create those or serve those. So agents, photographers, brokers, and MLSs, obviously, as a core piece of that. What do I want to be when I grow up? Or what did I want to be? I always want to be someone who's building things. I'd say that's my mindset. I don't have like a specific job category in mind, but someone who's making things with their hands. I enjoy that stuff in my free time, and working on a business now helps fulfill some of that too. So
that's cool.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Look at you actually living out what you envision. I can assure you nobody in the organized real estate space said they wanted to grow up and work with realtors and do an association. Mike, I want to come to you next, please.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Briggs. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partners at Seller Shield. And at Seller Shield, our kind of company motto is we want to stop home sale lawsuits at the front door. That's our slogan. And we're about risk mitigation and protecting the seller during the process, which in turn protects the brokerage and the agent just by default. And yeah, what did I want to be when I wanted to be when I grew up? I wanted to be a tennis player because I always played tennis. And I did become a tennis player for a little bit, but that was my past life. So yeah, now I'm just, I really did want to work with organized real estate. I set out to do it. Now I'm doing it.
Wow. When you were doing the tennis playing, I have to imagine you're from that era when the tennis shorts were a little bit on the shorter side.
They were tighty whities.
You ever just rock those on a Sunday now as an adult?
I got rid of all that stuff, and now it's coming back, and you see all these like vintage tennis Instagram posts, and I'm like, I had all that gear. I wish I would have kept it. I'd be very hip right now.
Cool. William,
I don't think it's fit.
Yeah, maybe it'd be really tight these days.
Yes.
How's it going?
Wrap us up here on introductions.
William Schoeffler, founder of Instashowing. It's a showing management platform, and we provide services along the digital transaction. So showings, offer, and closing software for MLSs and associations. So I guess I just kind of like Branick, a little bit different, but I just like when I have like lots of customers, lots of users, and you'll go to I just was in New York to an MLS event, and all these people were just talking about your software, giving you feedback that you've never met before. And so I really think software is really cool because you can have users across the country who are using you. And you just really focus on building one really great piece of software, and it just scales across the country, and you just are constantly every day trying to figure out how to improve it. And so that's what I really like about it. So I don't know, it's kind of the optimal job. Although Branick didn't share that he wants to be a rocket scientist one day too. So
that's also on the list, but that's one day.
Okay. Well, I did think at one point that I wanted to, be a pilot. Like we actually, where I'm at this week, we have the Blue Angels in town, and they're flying by, and that's so cool. But after all of my airline travel this week, I'm pretty certain that was probably not a good choice for me as an adult. So I think I started out with I wanted to be a Dallas Cowboy football player. That also did not come to fruition. So as it turns out, I'm just a lowly consultant. Can you guys just share with me a little bit, how long you've been in the space in terms of, in particular, organized real estate, or maybe just real estate in general, and what some of your initial observations were, upon entering into the space? And maybe I'll start with you, Mike, on this. And like I said, just a little bit of your experience and what were those initial observations?
Well, Seller Shield, we've been around for about, I think we're on our 6th year, maybe going on our 7th year. And then we've had association partnerships it started with Texas. So that, and I think that's been we're on our, going into our 5th year, 4th or 5th year with them. And yeah, just generally the observation, I think, which is that obviously each association is unique in its kind of apparatus and how you attack it, and from a business sales perspective. So just kind of trying to find out, what each association's goals are and what they're trying to accomplish for their members is different. So that gives you basically 50 unique set of sales tactics. So I would say that's the toughest part, is just trying to understand what they're, what are they trying to get to? What do they want to have happen for their members? And then trying to kind of explain why we would be a good fit for what they're trying to do. So.
And you primarily work with state level associations, or have you worked with local associations or MLSs as well?
Primarily state. We do some local relationships, but those usually just fall in after the state, just by having to kind of accumulate those forms for the agents in certain areas. If it's like Missouri and it's Kansas City and St. Louis, we need to obviously have those forms. So yeah, so it kind of just by default starts happening.
Yeah, you noted that every state's unique and different, but then I'm sure you note observations that are also different between the state's approach and the local's approach as well.
Yes, it's a very complicated labyrinth of just of what the end goal is. So I think that's really is trying to get your arms around that and understanding that everybody may have a different point they're trying to get to. I mean, they're trying to get to the same point, but they might be getting there differently, I guess. So it's trying to navigate that. And I think that's definitely been a challenge for our sales cycle. It's doable, but it's just, you got to roll up your sleeves and talk to a lot of people within the association and then the local association, and, to get to kind of your end point.
William, similar question, how long you've been at this, and kind of what were those initial thoughts on and observations from working in the organized real estate space?
Totally. So we really started about 2 years ago in just focusing on just individual agents and brokerages. And that's how we originally just focused our product. And then we started moving into the MLS world. I think a big part of the sales cycle, like as Mike mentioned, you can really understand how it's going to go by just your interactions with the CEO. Because a lot of the way everything is structured within the MLS is structured around that individual, because oftentimes you'll see them in the same position for a number of years. I guess it's a very mixed bag, as Mike was saying. So sometimes you'll have very responsive, you'll get right in front of a committee. Oftentimes it'll be a much larger gap of time. I guess I'd give an example of like one MLS took us like a month to get in and to actually move forward. But then there's another MLS who said they wanted to move forward and then stopped talking to us for about 2 months and then move forward again. So it's really just like a stop and start. So you have to realize that MLSs have a lot of priorities going on. And so you have to just go on their time scale.
Similar experiences and observations for you, Branick, and kind of how long have you guys been at this?
We've been at this for 3 years now, I think going on a little over than that, actually. And I think we've had similar experiences. We started early on working with real estate photographers. That was our first customer within the broader real estate industry. From there, we expanded to agents and brokers. And that's kind of our bottoms up approach to working with MLSs now. And really, that's how I focus most of our calls when I'm talking to MLSs, is how can we drive everything back to member value? If I can show up talking to an MLS saying, hey, this broker in your market is using this right now, give them a call. We'd love to do a deeper integration with you guys to provide more value for all of your members. And really, that's been our approach. And so far, it's been pretty successful on that front. And I think everyone is, when you can really show like bird in hand of like, hey, here's the value that people are getting right now. This is what we need to give more value to everyone. It's a win-win across the board. And it's just a question of like resources and other details than to actually make it happen, I think. But that's been our approach. And I think always driving everything back to the members at the end of the day is just an important focus for us.
Yeah, I think one item that William mentioned is that, you can kind of almost take the tone from the CEO. And in particular, he was referencing the MLS space, and most certainly in the MLS space, I think when we're working with our tech, clients, we do say, like, look, understand that some of the larger MLSs executives have a little bit more leeway with their decision making around, technology decisions, whereas, some might be more committee oriented and will really have to rely upon the volunteer input. What's the difference for you and how you view it when you've got to go in and really approach more of a committee style sales approach? Are there different pieces to that you think about and when you're in a room and you got all these folks that are clamoring for the solution that fits their understanding what the problem is?
Mike and William might have some different or more in-depth experience on some of that, dealing with committees and whatnot. I think generally, I really like MLSs that give a lot of power to the members to make decisions on the tools and products. I think there's generally probably two types of products towards MLSs, how I think about it at least. There's the products that require market-wide adoption, right? I think those kinds of products that affect all members, mandatory services, et cetera, those ones make a lot of sense to run through a technology committee, in my opinion. But I think there's a lot of solutions, and I think there's a lot of solutions that have yet to be seen that maybe just work great with an individual broker or an agent, but under the current standards and setups, you technically would still have to go through these tech committees. And I find that process can be kind of challenging for everyone, because I don't think it's the best use of the tech committee's time. The brokers just want this to help them run their business better. And for those scenarios, I love MLSs that have processes and systems in place that can just help their members get to using something quicker without the need for complication or legal and all these different elements there. So that's kind of how I break it down. I think the MLSs that do structure like that too are going to put themselves ahead of the curve and just getting more products into their market, more competition, and better engaging everyone.
William, Mike, anything to add on to that one?
No, I agree wholeheartedly with Branick. That's a perfect statement. And again, I mean, just to kind of be lighthearted, when it, from my perspective, when it does have to go to a committee, I'm just like, now it's going to, back to what William said, that's just going to bog down the whole process, slow it down. Their next committee meetings next quarter, and it's very hard for us, even as an organization, to stay focused on that, because we have a lot of moving balls as well, right? And we're going into different states or different localities that we have to spend resources, moving into a new market and then we got to go back. So it also creates complications for us, that slows the committee process, because it could drag on for 12 to 18 months. And we got other issues to solve, I guess. So it's tough to stay focused from our perspective.
Yeah, especially at a state level. While I think there's more frequency, just as we've seen at the national level with the ability to utilize remote meetings. States are also able to increase the frequency a little bit, but in large part, states can go, like you said, 6 months and really only meet as a committee at each of their kind of spring and fall meetings, and that's a really long and spaced out period of time to track. Even as a well-intentioned sales rep, that. Like you said, there's just a lot of going on with your day to day. So that's an interesting one, and especially at the state level, really pronounced.
Yeah, and I'd also reiterate that the state associations that empower their executives or whoever's in charge of whatever we're trying to do, it's just a way better setup and way easier for us to engage with them and get something done for the members in a time frame that's meaningful.
William, for you, what's it like when you're going into that environment where it's less of a CEO oriented or a smaller executive kind of committee decision, and it's going to be vetted through maybe a task group first before going to a committee and then ultimately to a board of directors? Each of those entities has a different decision-making approach within the organization itself. I have to imagine as an outsider, you're like, wait, the message was this for here, and now it's got to be there. You got to bounce kind of all around when you're trying to get those various types of decision-making bodies to a conclusion.
Totally. And oftentimes it's great to reach out to the individual members as well. So oftentimes we'll take note of who was on the call. And if somebody had a concern during the call, we'll write them down and then reach out to them afterwards, just to be able to alleviate that concern. Just because if you can get all the board members to see your product and to try to address what they're bringing up in the calls. I think that's the biggest starting point, because you get in these calls and oftentimes you'll show the product and you'll kind of get peppered with questions, and they'll pull you in all different directions. But I think Dave actually in the chat made a really good point about, and I hear this from brokers too, like sort of what's next, what's coming, what the MLSs are talking about, and what might be coming from the vendors in the future. And it's you hear from the brokers as well. It's like this debate between buying one subscription for everyone. What's the adoption of that product? Do we just give the members a certain amount of money that we allocate and they're able to pick different solutions, and then those solutions get paid based on the actual adoption, the actual usage? And then also talking to some other folks about these app stores essentially that they're bringing to MLSs, where they're trying to be able to allow members to choose, and sort of this like whole philosophy of like microservices architecture. So boards are definitely interesting to get through your products through, but it is definitely fascinating where everything is going as well. Because I think a lot of people have recognized the challenges, the benefits, but also the challenges of the board process.
What's it like? Because, and I think Dave also alluded to this in the chat, is, there generally is a want from the association to offer as low a cost, to access the technology. So they want to negotiate as low a price point as possible, which of course means then you have to deliver and meet, those expectations from a financing standpoint with your actual deliverables, and there's a cost of entry and all those other things. What's that been like for you coming into this industry in terms of how we tend to want to get to the lowest price point possible as an association or MLS to deliver that value back to members?
Yeah, I won't say this individual's name, but one of these MLS CEOs was mentioning, we love the process of bringing in new vendors because we can grind them down on the margin right before they go bankrupt. And it was kind of like, he was just joking about that, but like, it's really true. You're in two different positions. The vendor's trying to obviously get like a fair price for the product, and then the MLS has the scale. And so I think somebody had mentioned the expression of sort of the sales dynamics here. I think he used the expression, it's an oligopoly, which it's a smaller number of MLSs. Let's just say there's about 150 to 200 that really matter in terms of getting your product out there. And they just have massive scale. They have 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 members. And so they can sort of name their own price in a lot of ways. But then unfortunately, it's both the amount of money that you have to invest in the product, but then also the incentives for the vendor to try to actually put that money back into product development, I think has been an ongoing thing. And you'll see a lot of companies in this space end up finding other business models that help them support their product. So almost every company we've seen will basically sort of try to cover their costs with the MLS revenue, and then they'll try to make revenue from other alternative sources, whether that be like Matrix or Home Snap or Showing Time. And so then there's some tension there.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, there's 78 MLSs in this country that serve 80% of subscribers. So it's your field might be even smaller than what you referenced. And 50% are covered by, I think even fewer, might be 20, I think, MLSs that we're showing. So it is really about that market penetration at the highest levels. And yet those folks are, like you said, getting more sophisticated and wanting to give end users more choice. And so applying more of that app-based approach, like a CRMLS does offer. And so that is it's an intriguing, now entry opportunity for, like you said, you still got to invest and you want it to be a high quality product. Branick or Mike, have you encountered the same thing of, wanting to be really a value add and wanting to, work with your clients to provide a reasonable price point, but also bumping up against your capabilities of delivering a high quality product?
From our perspective, I don't have much experience here because our product offering is kind of unique in the fact that it's free. So I don't have a price issue. We even actually try. We revenue off a certain part of the product downstream, but we're even trying to get the associations to be more entrepreneurial and figure out how they can revenue with us, or and then use that money to add more value to their members. So it's almost like a reverse a reverse business model. And getting them to understand that is tough too. They're like, what? Because they're not used to getting pitched free, maybe making money off of offering something.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, Mike? Why do you think that is?
I just don't think people have done it before,
Okay.
So
it's just getting used to a new opportunity.
Yes.
Which is interesting because, we
hear
about.
And then we attack maybe a different sales cycle too. I mean, it's a different part of the sales department, as maybe you and I have talked before. Maybe, maybe it's not in the executive board. It's somewhere else that somebody's in charge of, getting some revenue and they listen. They're like, okay, now we're talking. So yeah, it's our product's a little unique in that form.
Well, it's interesting because when we're in strategic planning sessions, we hear all the time about, non-dues revenue and wanting to diversify. So it's interesting that, there's still that nuance to doing rev share. So, Branick, sorry, you were gonna add to the conversation.
No, I was just gonna echo a lot of Mike's thoughts. I mean, our core product right now for MLSs is free as well. And I think our main emphasis there is, hey, this can help drive more member benefit. It gets everyone on board, well incentivized and aligned. And there's other ways that we can make money downstream too. Which I think has been, pretty well received so far. It's definitely, you need to get people wrapping their heads around how that works and the nuances of it. I think, looking down the line here, there's definitely I think the core mission of the MLS is to help drive competition and cooperation between all these members. If we look at like the last, 30, 40 years of how they came together. And sometimes I think that can get skewed when you're trying to optimize for revenue and things, right? I think the MLSs that I see that really have that core mission front and center, and then obviously everyone needs revenue to continue to be able to fulfill that is really important. But others that are trying to like just maximize revenue at the consequence of competition and cooperation, I think is a really dangerous place. So I think people that are very aware of that are going to set themselves and their members and the associations up for the long term very well.
You mentioned there's a nuance then to where you do capitalize and where you can generate revenue. There's probably a lot of skepticism around that because generally speaking, anyone that's come in offering a free product is to gain access to data or maybe wants to then utilize things that otherwise the MLS wouldn't really be that supportive of, or an association, whatever it might be. And so how are you explaining that piece? Because yes, you do have to get to a monetization piece at some point, even if you have some free level pieces that come to it. So how are you explaining that in a way that builds trust?
Yeah, I mean, it's just perfectly aligning ourselves with brokers and agents and their members as well. So we have this base level that's free for everyone to use, and we're willing to put up the cost to set that up and get it out there. And then as you have kind of your super users in the market that are super engaged, maybe want more enterprise level features, they can upgrade and pay extra for those. And that's where we want to be incentivized, right? We really want to drive adoption. I think there was a couple chats in here as well about the importance of those adoption rates, right? We don't want to sign a deal with the MLS and like, okay, maybe you just sign it and you get your per seat fee and whatever. I think as long as we're really incentivized to drive adoption and to get benefit to the members, it's going to work out for everyone long term and everyone will be really happy.
Branick, can you explain like where you actually fit in the MLS and sort of like where your implementation actually is?
Yeah, we're definitely experimenting with a few different things, but I mean, at our core is how can we help make it easier to move content throughout the real estate industry? So we work with a lot of independent photography companies all across the country, brokerages as well. We're saying, hey, they have all of these files and different types of content sitting in their email and Dropbox and these different sources. Can we just get all of that into the MLS? Can we have integrations that will let them in a click of a button send that just to their account, right? And there's some nuance there to making sure it follows all the regulations and whatnot. But for us, it's like, okay, how can we work with MLSs to strengthen their value prop to everyone, get more data into their platform, which I think strengthens their core business as well. And at the end of the day, we're really just cutting out manual processes of dealing with zip files and labor and back office things and letting agents spend more of their time on their actual promotion of their listings and actually managing and working with their content too.
Well, William, I'm curious about your thoughts on the low or no cost initial offering. I mean, you're in a very competitive space, probably the one that's driven the most interest over the last year in diversifying, conversation around interoperability, all those things in terms of the showing. What is that like for you coming in and knowing that then maybe you do have to compete on price or look at, the low to no cost model to get your services into the field? What's that been like for you? And then ultimately, how do you monetize it? And again, fulfill your, revenue needs to continue to grow and become the company that you're intending to be?
Yeah. So I mean, I remember post showing time acquisition, we had all this interest, and my number one focus was always just focusing in on the product and how we make it better and how we make it better. And then unfortunately, what a lot of this has done is it's forced a lot of the focus to shift just to what's the business model, and what is it, and it's not clear. I mean, in most businesses, you'll be able to talk to the decision makers. You'll get a good perspective of how you can make money. But then oftentimes, a lot of the larger MLSs, they have sort of the mandate from the board that they work on. And then you talk to these folks, and they're not even clear on how they want to support the business model of this particular category, which basically then means is it's going to go to a free. Generally, you have to have that expectation. And then if you have that expectation, if it's going to free, especially in our category, it's like you have both Zillow and CoStar are trying to create the platform, and CoStar is trying to get agents onto their platform long term. And so the point I'm trying to make is it becomes a data play for them. And so if that's the business model, then that's kind of like, unfortunately, you have to think of business models around that to be able to make revenue if the MLS is no longer paying for your product.
How much research did you all do before entering into this space, and where did you go for that? Because again, organized real estate or real estate in general is seemingly this well understood industry externally, but a lot of times when technology or new entrants in particular come to us for advisement, they come to us and they're like, oh, here's our total addressable market, and we've got this projection, and then you look at it and you're like, ooh, man, we might have significantly overestimated what's happening here. So what was, when you guys were looking at entering into the marketplace, what kind of research were you able to attain, or did you come in kind of a little bit like, we'll go there and we'll learn as we get there?
From our perspective, it was a learn as we go through it. So yeah, there was not really any research that we set out to do. We just started a partnership with certain state, and then from there we moved to the next state, and then we moved to the next state to the next, and so just learning as we went. Just dove in.
There's a lot to learn.
Yes, I still don't know half of it.
Yeah, well, I think many of us who have been in the industry for well over a decade are feeling the same way, especially as quickly as things change. Branick, William, any kind of thoughts from you? Did you do the research, or did you just jump in, or?
Similar. I mean, we did some research, right? But I think I found quickly all my presumptions were incorrect, which is totally fair. I think that's just part of the process. And the sooner I reached out to MLS executives, got on board talking with agents and brokers, the more we learned, the more we figured it out. Just getting everyone in the same room talking about it all of a sudden simplifies a lot of things. And I think often as like, a tech partner, you just want to go to a website and read the API docs and go, right? But often just picking up the phone, calling the right people can help get you to that same quickness there that you would expect in other industries.
Yeah, so I think at some of these startup events I've been at recently in real estate tech, you'll see a lot of people say their TAM is about $30 trillion. So there's plenty of money here for this industry. But in reality, it's real estate. And so the real money that individuals will make is either on the transaction costs or on marketing or on providing software for those agents that actually are in that space. And so, yeah, it's not $30 trillion as a TAM, is what I've learned.
Yeah, but it makes it attractive. And then again, folks get in with maybe a misconception about what the marketplace is, and then they get in and they also start to learn about some of the nuances. What's it been like? And Mike, I don't know if this one applies to you necessarily, but for William and Branick, what's it been like? Branick, you said you liked being a builder, you wanted to be a builder. What's it been like building against real estate infrastructure with knowing that RETS is there, and we're still kind of going through this never-ending search to become more standardized and get into an API environment? What's that been like in terms of the development approach?
It definitely varies a lot. There's some vendors like FBS and the Flex MLS platform that I think do a fantastic job of this. They have open docs, APIs, sandbox environments. That's fantastic for tech companies. I think it's fantastic for MLSs. If your provider doesn't have any public-facing documentation, even when you ask for it, and they're pushing off tech vendors for months, and I won't name names, but there's definitely big tech vendors out there that do that. That's just not good for anyone, right? And I think that's going to be needing to change long term. You need to have more transparency just around what's even in place before you can even have an educated conversation about what kind of integration you want to do. That's often half the battle of even figuring out what is supported, what's not supported out here. So I think we've tried to put our energy and efforts into markets that are more forward thinking. Honestly, I really just care on focusing on markets that work on FBS and Flex. I don't want to waste my time in other places right now. And I think the MLSs that do have those structures in place, that have more open docs, have more infrastructure for testing and sandboxing and getting it in the hands of agents and brokers as quickly as possible, are going to be really benefiting their members the best long term.
Similar for you, William?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of MLSs are undergoing upgrades, and you hear a lot of them wanting to do upgrades. It's just there is that time delay in what the latest version. I mean, talking to folks at whether it be Black Knight or Matrix, they're all trying to upgrade their systems, and it takes a lot of time. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like right now the restrictions you often will face will be like, the MLS will ask, can we get a button here? And then one of the vendors will be like, no, we can't do that. And so it is like a lot of like restrictions right now in the way a lot of these vendors operate, and especially the time delays, just because they're not really incentivized to necessarily have the fastest response or support because they already have the contract. So that's the biggest thing I see.
Mike, I might ask a similar question to you in terms of you're kind of dependent on forms access, right? Like that's a highly contingent piece, and so there's similar barriers there, right? Of it just getting the underlying access to be able to fulfill the value of your platform.
Yes, the obviously the copyright to forms is different everywhere, and how we address that is paramount to entering a market. But then also, I think just going off what Branick said about the APIs, I just see a movement just from the brokerage and agent level of they're so fragmented with all this different tech, and they're really wanting to streamline and almost pick and choose. So having an API that's very, like he said, public facing and easy to interact with allows the members to then say, hey, you can integrate with this guy because we start here and you're a perfect fit there. So I think that just adds a ton of flex. I think it's all going that direction. So being able to have almost like the ability of picking and choosing what tech within your overall tech thing is just, it's where it's headed. People don't want to log in to a separate platform to do something else, to log in here to do something else. They want it just to be all happening in front of them. So we're really spending a lot of time in integration talks with other vendors. So there is, so if somebody says, oh, we're using this, we say, hey, we can do that, or we are doing that. So we consider ourselves Switzerland. So we want to be part of every ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's that general concept of greater interoperability, which has not been our strength of this industry, and we have been fairly siloed. And in some instances, frankly, there's some protectionist aspects to that, right? Whether we have an exclusive partnership that we're getting, financial revenue from, or if maybe we don't have as open of an API environment, established long-term vendors are a little more insulated, or it makes it harder for those outside of market to access data within an internal market. Have you seen that perception as well, or encounter that kind of, using technology or, vendor forms access, whatever it might be, as a little bit of a protectionist approach?
Yes. 100%.
Is that hard to understand coming from outside of real estate as to why that would be the case?
Mind-boggling. Yeah, I mean, if I was in charge of an MLS, I would try to make it as essential as possible to every function in the real estate ecosystem there. And that means open inputs and open outputs, and requiring everything there. You'd be Switzerland, you're defining the operating system for things by which they run. That is going to ensure that you are the core for everything. And just broadening, I think, the core vision of cooperation in competition that I think the MLS set out to be. And it's easy to sway off of that track, going down like certain exclusive deals for revenue or this or that, and people get ingrained in different roles. But if you really focus on like that core competition, cooperation, how can you make that happen? And how can you broaden what it means for an MLS in a market? I think it benefits everyone, consumers and all these different parties as well. As soon as you start picking favorites and making exclusive deals, it starts putting you in hot waters, which I think we'll start seeing more of in the coming years.
We should get Mike, or we should get Dave up here. He's asking a lot of great questions. Invite him in the board panel.
Have you experienced a lot of the same stuff, William? Or you mean, or
yeah,
some of those?
Yeah, and I totally agree with the challenges, and I'm just focusing in on specifically what Dave was mentioning and about Glide and showing time and CMLS. Sort of that's the conundrum they're dealing with and figuring out how do you deal with that. And right now the response has been essentially, let's open it up, let's try to get multiple products in there. I guess it kind of gets into this other issue of like, okay, it makes sense. You say, okay, well, I want a lot of choice in this category. But then it's hard as a vendor to try to figure out what is that world even going to look like? How much money should we even invest in that category if there's no real definable returns? Oftentimes when you're a business, you try to define what the revenue potential is, and then that's how you determine how much you invest in a certain category. And so it's a tough question because I understand it from both perspectives of the vendor and the MLS.
I think Dave's brought this up, and it's always a challenge. What do you do to address, adoption and education? I think especially when there are multiple, technologies offered in a single space, there's a taxing almost kind of feel from a HR standpoint in terms of training and support for the MLSs. So I mean, as much as there are kind of maybe some protectionist aspects, but there are also just some practical pieces of if you're stretched in terms of your ability to train and all those things. Mm-hmm. And frankly, end users in the MLS space, even when we give them, we go from the old American wrapped cheese to fine Gruyere, they still would rather just have the one that they know they have to unwrap and would. So how do we reconcile all of those pieces to get adoption? Anything that you found that works and is helpful?
I mean, I think incentives, as long as incentives are well aligned, I think you're going to be working towards that and well aligned around adoption, not just renewing a contract at like the same flat seat fee per member. I think oftentimes too, I think of companies approaching MLSs, they either are looking to the MLS for distribution for their product. I think those are often uphill battles, or you're looking to the MLS for integration towards like a deeper level of functionality, right? To help something work better. And I think companies in that boat have a little bit more control in terms of the training and the support, and they're often the ones putting more onerous on themselves for that. And that's how we've approached it. We want to make sure we have all those resources, that we're doing trainings, that we're going to the ground, meeting with people and making sure all those resources are there. I think it can be a battle if you're relying on a lot of the MLS to do a lot of those functions too. Obviously, you got to have a close partnership. You got to make sure you're putting all those resources in place, and it's doable. It's been done, obviously, but you just got to make sure you're all on the same page for that.
Yeah, I think we caution our tech providers that if you think that the MLS is just going to take your product and run with it and elevate it and do all the various communications and outreach pieces that it would take to drive adoption, you're probably setting yourself up for failure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
From our perspective, we have a pretty robust customer support. And then when we go into a relationship with an association, we lay out kind of the adoption training, utilization, kind of, the weekly webinars that we'll do for training, all that. We really try to engage in that because that's, again, we're a free product. So that for us it's how we monetize it. So we're very, very, very engaged in the training webinar. Anybody can call us with questions, we hop on it, so it's but that's a key component for us. We do not let the associations dangle with our product. We take that, we take ownership of that.
William, anything to add there?
Yeah, I just would echo all those comments. I mean, it just comes down to when you launch the product. It's even just hearing like about the early days of Dot Loop. It's like they made the product, and then really the next few years is just all about training the industry on how to use transaction management. And so just building something, and they will not come. So.
Tell me about this, and I know this one is really salient for you, William, but there's obviously been over the last year so much consolidation, purchases, all those things. So ownership structures with our tech partners from an organized real estate space has become far more of a top of mind conversation. So what's that like for you all when you're coming in, and especially maybe if you are seen as being newer into the industry and people are like, well, wait, what do you know, what's the long-term plan here? You know, we've seen a lot of this. And so there's definitely a nervousness around the ownership structure. What's that been like for you all this last year? William, I might have you start on that one because I think it's, you know, I mean, it's squarely a part of your conversations, I have to imagine, with every single organization.
Totally. And it's a tough question to answer. I mean, we are a business, and so we don't have an answer on some of these contract terms that basically they want to say like you can never be acquired ever. Well, that's hard then to raise money to then invest inside of a product. Like there's kind of, you got to realize that like if you want to be able to raise capital to build out a product suite, like you have to be able to say that to the investors that one day you'll be able to make money on your investment. So it's tough. There's not really, so one example is like one MLS we launched with, and then decided that they didn't like our ownership structure because it wasn't owned by an MLS exclusively. And so you'll have those different conversations. Other markets, they just want to get the best product for their members. And so it's sort of market by market on how you get that reaction and where people are caring about the ownership structure. But it's a tough question to answer.
Yeah, and because again, you want to be genuine, and you know, you could promise and say exactly what folks want to hear, right? And but then that compromises who you might become in the future. So I just, yeah, you're right. I mean, you all are coming in as entrepreneurs, and you're trying to do good things, but at the same time, you're business-minded folks, and so I think we have to acknowledge and recognize that. You know, we represent folks in organized real estate that are in their own way, you know, entrepreneurs, but they're not, you know, approaching that entrepreneurism in the same way that you all are with startup companies and getting into a space and developing some of that. What's it been like for you, Branick? Are people now ancillarily any technology that's in the space? You got to answer that question.
No, it definitely does come up for sure. I mean, it's usually not the main talking point, but once you get the contracts out, it's something. And I think even if people aren't super familiar with it, they feel the need to bring it up too. But which is totally fair. I totally understand that perspective. I think it's important. I think the MLSs that focus on being the most open and making it as easy as possible to work with everyone are going to be in the best spot for those scenarios, right? If you're signing a bunch of exclusive deals with different vendors and companies, and you're putting all your chips on one side of the table, there's a high chance, even of whatever contract, that's going to come back to bite you some way or another, which is what we saw with Showing Time, right? I think if you're focused on that open ecosystem and building that like a Switzerland marketplace, you're going to be in a great spot in the market, and your customers and your members are going to be able to make the choice themselves when that does come out down the road, because no one knows what's going to happen in the future, right? So if some big bad company goes and buys everyone up and people don't want to work with them, making it as easy as possible for them to switch to alternatives is really important, I think, and having that baked in before it's the issue. So I mean, everyone's talking about this in the showing space right now. I think there's probably 4 or 5 other segments of what the MLS does today that they should be thinking about. That's probably more important as they're doing these other deals on those, and just making sure that foundation is laid. So that's probably my main thoughts.
I guess, Branick, but like the reality is like smaller MLSs, like let's just say forms management and all those categories, like most MLSs don't have the capacity to be able to think about multiple vendors in each category. And the larger MLSs can, but it just seems like, I guess that's the challenge, is being able to support that in an MLS that only has 5,000 members, for example.
No, it's a good point. I think it comes up a lot to, what is that core of the MLS mission again? I keep driving back to the competition and cooperation. I think that's really important. I think when we look at the mechanisms that MLS has had in the past to work with outside vendors, all of it was through exclusive market-wide deals. And I think we just needed like a broad reframing of that, right? The only way for an MLS to work with the tech vendor is not an exclusive arrangement that you're selling something on like a per seat basis to every member out there. I think there's a ton of different doors that can be opened for most products in the industry, right? I think some product categories that make sense, like showings, I actually see a lot of the network effects benefits of working with one provider potentially there. But for a lot of other businesses, like most of them don't need full IDX feeds. Most of them don't need access to all the data. Most of them just need an avenue in. And if we can keep those avenues clear for companies to work with their members, that's great. And actually, I don't think requires a huge lift from the small providers. But that's definitely a fair challenge to bring up.
Yeah, those are very insightful, Branick. Appreciate it. Mike, what has been, has this landed in your lap as well? Is it something that is just in every vendor consideration or a conversation, or not as much?
I get asked every conversation I have that what's our ownership structure and where are we headed, and are you going to get bought like Glide? So it happens every single time. And again, I'm gonna what William and Brandon said. I mean, who knows what the future holds? Of course, we have no plans to do that. But I mean, yeah, we're entrepreneurs and we're businessmen. But I mean, from our perspective, we're a little bit unique in that we don't consider ourselves a tech platform. We're more of a risk management platform. So I don't think we would get bought by a brokerage because it just doesn't make sense. So we can kind of say that with, we might get bought by LegalZoom or something, but not because no one's going to buy us for our technology. So it's a little bit unique, but it's definitely as you said, the top of mind on questions, especially when you go, as William said, or Branick said, into the contractual phase, they start bringing it up, and I mean, you can't have an answer for that. It's just like that the answer is
TBD.
And just to be fair, like this isn't only a question that's happening in MLS world. Like I was just at a commercial conference, and it's the same questions. It's who owns the data. It's, and a big thing is also like, can we make investment in these vendors? Like, hey, let's run a pilot. If it's a successful pilot, we recognize that us as this commercial brokerage, we have such a huge market reach and we're creating value alongside of you. So let's make an investment. And we've had that conversation with MLSs as well. It's like, they are the distribution. They are the ones that you're getting your product out in front. So can they take part in the value appreciation? So I think that's also a big concern, because a lot of these MLS executives would like to probably participate in the upside of, or at least the MLSs would like to take part in appreciation of some of the companies that are in their marketplace.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one, because that's something that is fairly new to the space, even considering that. But I think here I would be curious as to your thoughts on when you do take someone on as an equity partner, like what are your expectations of them? Because like we're organized real estate's looking at you saying, here's our expectations of you, we're doing all this and we want to, like you said, we want to grow along with you, all those things. But for you all, as you on board, whether it's, an organized real estate partner or elsewise, like what kind of responsibilities does an equity partner have to you in your business? And whoever wants to jump on that one, go ahead.
I think, a lot of this just comes down to alignment, right? There's no secret plans. It's like, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to make this as easy as possible for everyone. This is the benefit we see to the world. Getting equity partners, investors on board with that vision, then getting your customers on board with that vision too, makes it fantastic for everyone. It's just a win-win. When you have companies that have varying goals, that's where I think you'd see the tensions. And we've really tried to be very truthful and thoughtful from the beginning that, hey, the successful outcome for all of us is the same here. Now, for other companies, it might be different incentives. And that's probably where those conversations are really important to have, right? And I think the closer you can get all your different customers aligned to the same goal or equity holders, the better.
Capital is sort of a commodity. And so it really matters what the strategic value is of working with somebody else, whether that's a distribution partner. So I think it's not about the money. It's more about who is it, how are they going to be able to drive value outside of just the investment, and hopefully the investment makes them have more interest in being able to help out and to align incentives.
What about the idea, now that I'm an equity partner, I get to really be directive about where the future of your organization is going? Because I think being newer into that space, there's that presumption of, okay, now we're an equity holder. Now we really get to drive, agendas and be really engaged and kind of make sure that it's headed where we want it to go. How would you manage those expectations?
That's a tough one. There's, I guess, two different ways you want to think about a business. Oftentimes it's about how do you grow it? How do you serve more users? How do you deepen your value proposition for those users? And that is a conflict of somebody who wants to direct it from a different agenda that's not necessarily about just driving direct value to the users. So I don't think there's a great answer. And I think that is the tension. That is the hard tension of accepting outside money that has a perspective on where they want to take the business that isn't necessarily directly aligned with your end users and what they want and what they want to pay for.
Anything to add, Branick or Mike?
No, we as a company wouldn't take an equity investment from a customer. So
Why not?
Because all of the problems it creates. So and we're well capitalized anyway, so we don't need to look down that road. So it's it just we've had the opportunity and we've turned it down. So just
interesting.
I said that earlier. We view ourselves as Switzerland for the seller. So we don't want to have any alignments. We're trying to protect the seller.
And not to keep bringing this back to the commercial side, but this is pretty common. A lot of people in the commercial space will invest in the vendors that they run pilots with. So it's not necessarily a unique question to residential real estate.
Branick, were you going to jump in on that one too?
I was just going to echo Mike's thoughts there too. I think the more you can do just to stay neutral is probably the best. That's our approach we've taken so far. It's obviously flattering when customers want to invest, and they're obviously big advocates because they are your customers. But I think there's still that responsibility to remain neutral for all of your customers at the end of the day.
Curious as to how you look at this. We're seeing, the changing face of members or subscribers in the organized real estate space. In other words, we have now folks that are a brokerage, that are, a tech vendor, and all these other things. And I think there's a struggle to understand that there are verticals within these organizations. And I think in other, especially technology related realms, we're kind of accustomed to verticals with ownership structures that are, mean that at the top there's alignment, but each kind of division has a separation or firewall. Anything that you've noted from elsewhere that we should be thinking about in organized real estate is we're likely to see more of this, where, Compass is buying a Glide and obviously the Zillow is buying a Showing Time and all these things where we're having these entities and they have multiple verticals. Any lessons from outside of real estate that we might need to apply here as we start to think this through?
I think the App Store model is probably the best, just offering the ability for members to be able to plug and play different solutions. That's the biggest thing. I think it's realizing that the MLS does have market power and which vendors they select. And so oftentimes just being more open to creating sort of just that API feature.
Yeah. Jumping on that, I think the transparent open APIs is a big step in the right direction for everyone. I think actually everyone wants that future too. I think once you actually dig deep, there's not much holdback to that. It's just how can we make that happen quickly? I think it just really opens the door for everyone just to even see what's possible out there. It's so hard going into a market not knowing what's in place already. How are you supposed to even approach them and make accurate decisions or proposals about what you want to do or what you want to see that future?
Mike, anything to add on that one?
No, I agree with the open APIs. I see that's the direction it has to head. And but yeah, just your question of these big, the big conglomerates also have tech companies that are bigger than a lot of tech companies, and then they want to bring you into the ecosystem. And again, you have to be very careful about those alignments if you're trying to serve a broader market. And when you get in there, because you could and I won't name who those are, but everyone can probably figure it out. You can get caught up just chasing your tail within that one tech at a big conglomerate that owns a lot of brands. So it's and then I just circle back to the App Store model. I just totally see that that's where it's headed, and it has to happen, and that's what the brokerages want to have happen. So yeah.
If you were to go in, and I asked you to play the consultant's role, if you were going to go in and you were going to advise, an association, an MLS, whatever it might be, and the decision makers who are looking to select a technology, what would you advise them to really think through as they're making these decisions that have become far more complex around technology, whether it's an ownership structure or the technical acumen or whatever it might be? What would you advise these volunteer groups and the executives to think through when making their decisions? And whoever wants to jump in on that one, go for it.
I think it's all smart to just run a pilot with small number of customers. I'm always amazed when we try to share like logins to let people play around in our software themselves. Too many people I think rely just on the demo from the salesperson, and then they just go to a committee and talk about it. But I think really asking for that vendor to share access and allowing members to experience the software themselves. I think that's the best way to get a critical eye on the software, because you never know from a pitch. You never really know if it works or if it's how this is going to look until you actually work with it yourself and do a pilot.
Yeah, I'd say taking the App Store metaphor a little bit further here. Apple doesn't really sit there saying, this app is going to be our one app for taking notes. This app's going to be our one app for this. They have some baked in apps that help get everyone started, right? But outside of that, their main focus is just defining the guidelines by which everyone operates. I think tech committees that focus on that, of how can we set those clear guidelines that are transparent, are fantastic, as opposed to focusing on yes or no on certain companies. Let's focus on the guidelines. Let's focus on the open regulations. Let's make it easy to get people in. They have to play by the rules. Here's our rules that everyone has to play by. And yes, maybe we'll have a couple that will preload on your phone to get you started for your average member. But outside of that, let's just make sure we have a fair playing field for everyone else to compete. And I think that will put you in a really good spot. I actually think there's probably going to be a lot of liability issues with tech committees making exclusive choices in one market over another, as DOJ and other people start looking, okay, is this really fair on what's happening here? And I think the more you can be transparent and open there, the better you're going to set yourself up long term.
I like that we're being clear about established parameters and what would make for an acceptable partner, rather than just vetting the specific technology, but thinking through the true partnership component of it, which gets to some of those longer term pieces and having some criteria and some metrics in which to measure against. I do like that one. I think that's great, because that also gets the emotion out of it, right? Like, I personally like this connects with me. I like where that button is, right? And gets it to, is this something that fulfills our general goal and meets our expectations and parameters? I think that's
the decision should never come down to like, oh, I don't like their colors or where this button is, right? That's not not the level. But unfortunately, that's the truth, though. It is. I mean, that's what it is for a lot of time right now. A lot of people on the tech committees and whatnot are like, I didn't like the button there. Oh, this doesn't make sense to me. That is so disincentivizing for a tech company to want to work with an MLS. And getting rid of that, I think, is a big step forward for everyone.
Legitimately working in a hardware-based piece, and they're like, I like it because of its color. And it's like, whoa, let's maybe raise it up a level. Mike, anything to add to that? Like, what would you advise these decision-making groups in terms of how best to make solid technology decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I keep agreeing with Branick on just the transparency and the openness, but with that, I think part of the association or that is that they're vetters of the technology for their members. So if all of a sudden, if you have an open, when you have an open marketplace, I think their structure is going to be, how do we either certify certain ones or not? Because otherwise the members are just going to get constantly bombarded with sales calls, which they, because, we're in the App Store. So, so I think that's going to be a dynamic, but just my recommendation would be, I think, have an open mind. That if I were going to go into one of these associations, is don't think the answer to what your members want. I think you have to have an open mind and pilot it, beta it, and get their feedback. And usually that answer will be different than what you thought it was.
We haven't had a tendency to do the beta-based approach, and like, we're really nervous to fail at any increment and not learn quickly and fail forward. It's something that inherently, because we are acting on behalf of others' fiduciary responsibilities, I think there's a nervousness to do those types of things, where if we put something out there and it's not 100% ready, we might not get the reception that we want from our peer group, right? They might be hypercritical of our decision making. So I think that's also insightful. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Good conversations. If anyone was interested in learning more about your products, how would they do so? Mike, start with you.
Go to sellershield.com And you can get anywhere on our website, or they can email me at mike.briggs, BRIGGS, @sellershield.com.
So Branick?
Our website, I just put it in the chat, aryeo.com, ARYEO, or you can email me at branick@aryeo.com as well. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Clint.
Of course.
Likewise.
Thanks for having
Share
us.
an email.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks, gents. Appreciated the time and the candor today. I know it's sometimes hard where I'm asking you tough questions about, clientele that you're selling into. I thought you all provided great insights, and I know it's not always the easiest position to be put in, but I thought you all were great. So thanks so much. Appreciate it. And to everybody that joined us today, certainly appreciate you and your time. Go out and enjoy your Friday, and we'll catch you next month here on Organized Real Estate.